This drama begins by showing a housewife named Cha Jong-sok visiting a beauty clinic owned by her best friend, Baek Mi-hee. Jong-sok has been friends with Mi-hee since they were both in medical school, but Jong-sok reluctantly had to give up her dream of becoming a doctor due to pregnancy. Jong-sok successfully completed her residency and got her license to practice, but after getting married and having 2 children, Jong-sok chose to be a full-time housewife for more than 20 years. On the other hand, Mi-hee managed to become a doctor and set up a beauty clinic that is now one of the most famous beauty clinics in the city. After having a skin treatment at the beauty clinic, Jong-sok, who was about to return home by bus, immediately became panicked when a man suddenly became short of breath on the bus. Jong-sok intended to provide medical assistance, but since she had not worked as a doctor for more than 20 years, she was completely unable to think of any medical assistance when faced with the situation. Fortunately, an ambulance soon arrived to take the man to the hospital, but Jong-sok was asked to accompany the man because she had blurted out that she was a doctor. At the same time, a man named Roy Kim boarded the ambulance while saying that he was a surgeon. On the way to the hospital, the patient's condition suddenly deteriorated, so Roy immediately performed medical assistance and managed to save his life. Upon arrival at the hospital, Roy then scolded Jong-sok for thinking that Jong-sok had lied about her profession as a doctor. However, Jong-sok assured Roy that she used to be a doctor, but she had not worked for more than 20 years, so she then panicked when faced with an emergency situation. Jong-sok then praised Roy because he managed to perform medical aid on time and save the patient's life. The scene then switches and shows Jong-sok's husband, So In-ho, who is secretly having an affair with his colleague, Choi Seung-hee. Both are doctors at Gusan University Hospital, and they are highly respected at the hospital. Although In-ho looks very affectionate with Seung-hee, he is always cold-hearted and strict with his family. In-ho also imposed his will on his children and required his daughter, Lee-rang, to enroll in medical school. In addition, In-ho also criticized his son, Jong-min, about his appearance because as a doctor, they should always need to look professional. Although Jong-sok and In-ho's marriage seems harmonious and they still live in the same house, they have been separated for several years. That night, Jong-sok tried to persuade her husband to sleep in their room. Even Jong-sok also tried to be intimate with her husband, but In-ho was so cold to her. Seeing her husband's cold attitude towards her, Jong-sok then became upset and left his room. Jong-sok didn't understand why In-ho had been cold to her for the past few years, even though she had tried to be a good and understanding wife. Jong-sok never even complained when she had to do all the housework, but In-ho never appreciated her. The next day, when Jong-sok was about to buy a new pair of sunglasses for her husband, she suddenly collapsed unconscious and was immediately taken to the emergency room. After waking up, Jong-sok then called In-ho, who was at the airport, because he intended to go to Paris with Seung-hee to attend a conference. In-ho then asked about Jong-sok's condition, but because the doctor could not confirm Jong-sok's condition, In-ho decided to continue traveling to Paris with Seung-hee. On the other hand, Seung-hee, who saw In-ho looking uneasy, suggested that In-ho cancel their trip. However, In-ho prefers to go to Paris with Seung-hee instead of accompanying his wife who is hospitalized. In-ho even gives Seung-hee an expensive bracelet as a gift for this trip. Meanwhile, a resident doctor tells Jong-sok that she needs to be hospitalized immediately as she is suffering from acute hepatitis. Jong-sok then tries to contact her mother-in-law, A-sim, to be her guardian, but A-sim refuses to come because she has already booked a place at a luxury spa. Upon hearing that, Jong-sok then contacted her mother, Dok-rae, to ask her to come to the hospital, but Dok-rae was busy making rice cakes, so Jong-sok felt reluctant to tell her to come to the hospital. In the emergency room, Jong-sok was reminded of the past when she was a resident doctor treating patients. Jong-sok slightly regretted her decision to no longer work as a doctor because caring for people who were sick was a noble job. As Jong-sok was about to head to the hospital cafeteria on the 5th floor, she accidentally saw Roy Kim and a high school girl on the emergency stairs. Jong-sok thought that they were together and she intended to stop them because she thought it was inappropriate. But surprisingly, Roy turned out to be treating the high school girl because she had just been in an accident and didn't have the money to go to the hospital. Jong-sok then apologized for misunderstanding Roy and intended to go to see a doctor to check her health condition, but unexpectedly, Roy turned out to be the doctor. Roy told Jong-sok that she was suffering from acute hepatitis and she had to undergo intensive care at the hospital immediately. Upon learning that, Jong-sok then asked her mother to come to the hospital to be her guardian. A few days later, Roy explained to Jong-sok and her family that Jong-sok had to undergo liver transplant surgery immediately because her health condition was deteriorating. After conducting a thorough examination, Roy informed that In-ho had a high enough compatibility to donate his liver to Jong-sok, especially since In-ho also had a healthy liver. However, In-ho's mother, A-sim, firmly refused if In-ho had to donate his liver to Jong-sok. Asim did not even hesitate to voice her disapproval in front of Roy and her family, and told Jong-sok to wait for a donor from a brain-dead patient because Asim thought that Jong-sok was not too dying to get a donor as early as possible. On the other hand, Dok-rae didn't expect that In-ho did nothing to stop his mother from cornering Jong-sok in front of her family, even though Jong-sok was seriously ill. Dok-rae tries to persuade her adoptive son, Jong-soo, to donate his liver to Jong-sok, but Jong-soo seems reluctant to donate his liver because he thinks of his family, even though Dok-rae has offered her considerable savings. At the hospital, Roy tries to comfort Jong-sok, who feels guilty to her family for being a burden to them after being diagnosed with a chronic illness. Upon knowing that Jong-sok used to be a doctor, Roy then took Jong-sok to the operating room to observe the operation of a patient with a chronic disease and took some photos for a memento before entering the operating room. Meanwhile, Seung-yi envied Jong-sok because In-ho became more attentive to his wife after Jong-sok was hospitalized. Seung-yi then asked In-ho if he would do the same if she was hospitalized, but In-ho didn't make any comment. The following days, Jong-sok's condition worsens, while Jong-soo refuses to donate his liver. Even his wife pleads with Dok-rae that Jong-soo should not donate his liver to Jong-sok because they are worried about their baby son's future. On the other hand, Jong-min and Lee-rong try to persuade their father to donate his liver because they have no other donors because Jong-sok's condition is too critical to wait for a brain-dead donor. In-ho, who doesn't want Jong-sok to die because she still has to take care of their children, reluctantly decides to donate his liver despite his mother's opposition. On the other hand, Seung-yi seems so angry and frustrated after learning that In-ho will donate his liver to Jong-sok. Seung-yi, who feels jealous of Jong-sok, tries to persuade In-ho to cancel the transplant operation, but In-ho has no choice because he wants to save the life of Jong-sok, who is the mother of his children. At the hospital, Dok-rae and Jong-sok were very grateful to In-ho because he was willing to donate his liver to Jong-sok. Jong-sok then tells In-ho that during their more than 20 years of marriage, she had hated In-ho in some ways, but now she feels very grateful that In-ho was willing to donate his liver for her. The next day, when In-ho is about to sign the consent document to perform the liver transplant surgery, Asim suddenly appears and makes a scene in the hospital as she tries to stop In-ho from donating his liver to Jong-sok. Soon after that, Jong-sok underwent a liver transplant surgery which was handled directly by Roy, and the surgery went successfully. A few hours later, Jong-sok had passed the critical period, and the first thing she did after she woke up was cursing at her husband. Because before the operation, Jong-sok had seen Asim making a scene at the hospital, and In-ho did nothing to stop his mother, as if he was expecting the commotion to happen because In-ho was actually reluctant to donate his liver to Jong-sok. After cursing In-ho, Jong-sok seemed so relieved to have expressed her resentment towards her husband that she had been harboring for years. Some time earlier, when In-ho was about to sign the consent document, he received a text message from Seung-yi begging him not to donate his liver to Jong-sok. So In-ho finally decided to cancel his intention to perform the liver transplant surgery. Roy seemed surprised to hear that, and he intended to persuade In-ho because Jong-sok's condition was already dying. However, a resident doctor informs Roy that a patient who was in an accident has been declared brain dead, and he has checked the patient's compatibility with Jong-sok. After confirming that the patient had a high enough compatibility to be a donor, Roy immediately performed a transplant operation to save Jong-sok's life. A few days after Jong-sok returned home, Asim told her to pick up Asim's luxury bag at the department store because she just bought a luxury bag that was said to be limited edition. Upon hearing that, Jong-sok then questioned Asim about some luxury items that Asim bought in the past few months, but Asim argued that she just wanted to enjoy her life that might not be long. Soon after that, Jong-sok realized that her family, especially In-ho, never really cared about her, so Jong-sok decided to make herself happy by buying some luxury items using In-ho's credit card. At the hospital, In-ho looks so shocked after he gets a notification that Jong-sok has bought luxury items totaling more than 10 million won in one day. In-ho then calls Jong-sok to demand an explanation, but Jong-sok argues that in their more than 20 years of marriage, she has never once spent In-ho's money on herself. Even the luxury items she's gotten so far are second-hand items that belong to Asim. Jong-sok also adds that from now on she will live her life without thinking about others and do whatever she wants. On the other hand, Mi, who was having lunch with Jong-sok, then praised Jong-sok for having the courage to reveal her concerns that she has been holding back for years. Jong-sok told Mi that previously she felt her life was perfect because her husband was an elite doctor at a very prestigious university hospital, and she also had two good and smart children. However, after she managed to come back from the brink of death, Jong-sok realized that all of that meant nothing. Later that night, Jong-sok went to In-ho, who was sleeping in his room, and suddenly slapped him. In-ho, who woke up, then asked Jong-sok why she suddenly slapped him, but Jong-sok only said that she was jealous of In-ho's smooth skin. Upon realizing that Jong Sok had been acting strangely lately, In-ho then thought that Jong Sok's mental health might be a little disturbed after being on the verge of death and undergoing a very risky surgery. Therefore, In-ho told Jong Sok to do whatever she wanted, including shopping reasonably and relaxing without the need to do household chores, so that Jong Sok could focus more on recovering her post-surgery condition. Because In-ho had allowed her to do whatever she wanted, Jong Sok began to behave as she pleased, even deliberately not making breakfast for her family. Shortly afterward, Jong Sok visited her mother, who then advised her to do things that made her feel happy. Since Jong Sok used to be happiest when she was studying, she became interested in studying Jong Min's medical books and felt excited when she realized that she had a pretty good memory. A few days later, when Jong Sok was about to go drinking wine with me, A-sim questioned Jong Sok's luxury bag, which was exactly the same as the limited edition bag she bought at the department store. A-sim thought that Jong Sok bought an imitation, but Jong Sok revealed to A-sim that she bought the bag at the same store where she got A-sim's bag, so it was the real thing. While drinking wine together, Mi tells Jong Sok about Seung-yi, who used to be In-ho's lover during college. Seung-yi and In-ho were the most famous couple on campus, and everyone thought that they would eventually get married. But unexpectedly, In-ho got Jong Sok pregnant and chose to leave Seung-yi so that he could marry Jong Sok, and the marriage has been going on for more than 20 years now. Jong Sok then told me about the beginning of his relationship with In-ho, which led to her getting pregnant and having to finish her final year at college in a heavily pregnant state. Upon hearing that, Mi told Jong Sok that she and the others felt sorry for Seung-yi because In-ho had betrayed her, but on the other hand, Mi also admired In-ho for being responsible by marrying Jong Sok. However, unbeknownst to Jong Sok and Mi, In-ho and Seung-yi secretly rekindled their romance when they accidentally met in the United States. The relationship continues to this day, and In-ho seems to love Seung-yi, who is his first love, more than Jong Sok, who is his legal wife. The next day, Jong Sok went to In-ho at the hospital to ask In-ho to put her name on the house ownership letter. However, In-ho tells Jong Sok that he can't make that decision alone, since he also got the house as an inheritance from his father. But Jong Sok seemed to ignore In-ho's reasoning and told In-ho to consider it and give his decision as soon as possible. Shortly afterward, Jong Sok intended to visit Jong Min, who was interning at the hospital, but he saw Jong Min being scolded by his senior, Jong So-ra, so Jong Sok decided not to disturb them. When she was about to leave, Jong Sok accidentally met Roy, who had just met someone at the hospital. Jong Sok then thanked Roy for saving her life. On that occasion, Roy asked for Jong Sok's phone number because he intended to send Jong Sok photos that he took when they were about to observe a patient's surgery at the hospital some time ago. Roy then suggested that Jong Sok return to work as a doctor after Jong Sok expressed her opinion that being a doctor is a noble job. Later that night, Jong Sok seems to consider Roy's suggestion to return to work as a doctor while unpacking her old belongings from when she was still undergoing her residency at the hospital. On the other hand, In-ho tries to discuss the ownership of the house with his mother, but A-sim flatly refuses if In-ho includes Jong Sok's name in the ownership letter because the house is inherited from In-ho's father. Shortly afterward, In-ho then told Jong Sok that he couldn't put Jong Sok's name on the house ownership papers because his mother refused to do so. Upon hearing that, Jong Sok then expressed her desire to become a resident doctor to In-ho. But In-ho told Jong Sok to cancel her intention because Jong Sok was old and had just undergone liver transplant surgery, which made her have to take immunosuppressant drugs regularly. However, after seeing Jong Sok, who seemed really serious about becoming a resident doctor, In-ho then allowed Jong Sok to take the resident exam this year, even though he was sure Jong Sok would fail the exam. The next day, A-sim intends to explain her reasons for refusing Jong Sok to be included in the ownership of the house while trying to persuade Jong Sok by giving Jong Sok her car. But Jong Sok refused because she didn't want to be controlled by her mother-in-law. After having lunch with A-sim, Jong Sok went to the bookstore to buy medical books and started studying diligently to prepare for the resident assessment exam that would be held in the next 100 days. Jong Sok was able to do the exam questions smoothly, and surprisingly, she managed to get a score of 49, even higher than Jong Min, who only got a score of 45. After successfully getting a good score in the resident assessment exam, Jong Sok then tried to apply to become a resident doctor at Gusan University Hospital and happened to apply in the same department as Seung-hee. Seung-hee then informs In-ho about it, and In-ho looks so shocked because he didn't expect Jong Sok to get a good score in the resident assessment exam and apply to their hospital. Upon hearing that, In-ho intended to stop his wife, who was about to have an interview at the hospital. But he was too late, as Jong Sok had already arrived at the interview and met Jong Min, who was very surprised as he didn't expect his mother to have a resident interview, just like him. During the interview, some of the doctors mentioned Jong-sok's age and that Jong-sok had a liver transplant and had to take immunosuppressant drugs. They questioned Jong-sok's physical condition, which might be a major obstacle during her training as a resident doctor. Therefore, they decided to eliminate Jong-sok from the list of resident doctor candidates. After the interview, Jong-min asks his mother about her seriousness to become a resident doctor at the hospital, because it means Jong-sok will be working at the same hospital as In-ho, even though In-ho has always kept his wife a secret from his colleagues. Jong-min is also worried about Jong-sok's health condition because Jong-sok will become more susceptible to infection if she works at the hospital. However, Jong-sok told Jong-min to worry about her if she had been accepted to work at the hospital. Soon after that, Jong-sok visits Seung-hee in her office and blatantly tells Seung-hee that she applied to the family medicine department after seeing Seung-hee's name on the website. Jong-sok had intended to work in the same department as Seung-hee since In-ho had been keeping it a secret that he worked at the same hospital as Seung-hee. In the afternoon, Jong-sok gets a call from the hospital informing him that she was not accepted to work at Gusan University Hospital because she was too old and weak to be a resident doctor. While having dinner, Jong-min suggests that Jong-sok apply to other smaller hospitals because Gusan University Hospital is a very prestigious hospital, so the competition to become a resident doctor at the hospital is quite high. On the other hand, In-ho seems overjoyed after learning that Jong-sok was eliminated from the list of resident doctors who will be working at his hospital, because it indicates that he doesn't have to worry about his affair with Seung-hee. The next day, Jong-sok intended to take a holiday with Mi-hee out of town. But while they were at the airport, Jong-sok got a call from the family medicine department of Gusan University Hospital that she was accepted to work as a resident doctor in the department. On the first day of work, Jong-sok got to know her colleagues Ki-yeon and Do-gyeom, who were both just starting their residency in the family medicine department. Do-gyeom was a kind and polite young man, but Ki-yeon was an outspoken girl, who even openly told Jong-sok that she hated people who were respect crazy just because they were older than her. Soon after that, Seung-hee seemed so shocked to find out that the head of family medicine department, Dr. Lim, decided to accept Jong-sok as a resident doctor in their department because she previously took a 2-day leave, so Dr. Lim didn't have time to discuss it with her. On the other hand, In-ho was also very shocked when he found out that his wife was accepted to work in the same department as Seung-hee, who was his mistress. Seung-hee then urged In-ho to solve the problem while threatening to leave In-ho if In-ho could no longer control his wife. In-ho tried to call Jong-sok, but Jong-sok switched off her mobile phone while working, and In-ho instead got an email notification about Roy Kim, who moved to Gusan University Hospital and has joined the surgery department. Upon knowing that, In-ho immediately rushed to Roy in his office and warned Roy to keep the fact that Jong-sok was his wife a secret because he had never discussed his wife to his colleagues at the hospital. In addition, In-ho also asked Roy to persuade Jong-sok to quit the residency. In-ho argued that he was worried about Jong-sok's health condition, who had just undergone liver transplant surgery. However, Roy says that he will support Jong-sok's decision to be motivated to become a doctor again, while telling In-ho that he will check Jong-sok's health condition regularly, especially now that they work at the same hospital, so it will be easier for Roy to keep an eye on Jong-sok. Meanwhile, Jong-sok had to handle a patient from the VIP ward, Mr. Oh, who had to undergo an endoscopy due to his chronic illness. As a VIP patient, Mr. Oh seemed unhappy that it was a first-year resident doctor who came to treat him, but Jong-sok gently explained all the procedures that Mr. Oh would undergo during his treatment at the hospital, so Mr. Oh didn't mind too much. On the other hand, Seung-hee protests to Dr. Lim for accepting Jong-sok without first discussing it with her. However, Dr. Lim argues that he is the head of the department, so he has the right to decide something absolutely, especially if the decision can affect the reputation of their hospital. At the same time, a doctor informs them that the resident doctor who was going to be sent to the surgery department as a favor decided to resign after finding out that she was pregnant. Upon hearing that, Seung-hee then recommends Jong-sok to the surgery department to replace the resident doctor. Shortly afterward, In-ho and Jong-min seem surprised to learn that Jong-sok will be working in the surgery department for a while, and they immediately become awkward with each other. Fortunately, So-ra, who introduced Jong-sok to them, was not suspicious of the sudden awkwardness between the three of them. Jong-sok is then assigned to handle the patients in the emergency department, and Jong-sok tries to do her job as best as she can because she doesn't want to inconvenience others. Even so, Jong-sok seemed quite overwhelmed after a few hours of working with patients, so In-ho then secretly took her to the emergency stairs and tried to persuade Jong-sok to stop working. However, Jong-sok insisted on continuing her residency at the hospital and warned In-ho to keep his distance from her if In-ho didn't want his colleagues to find out that Jong-sok was his wife. During lunch, Jong Min told his mother that he was worried about Jong Sok's physical condition if she insisted on continuing her residency, but Jong Sok assured Jong Min that she felt very healthy and capable of becoming a resident doctor. Upon knowing that Jong Sok was quite stubborn if she had decided something in her life, Jong Min could only support his mother's decision and told Jong Sok not to feel reluctant to ask him for help if Jong Sok had difficulty doing her job. In the evening, while going home, Jong Sok accidentally met Roy and they decided to have coffee together. Roy blatantly asked when Jong Sok would get a divorce because he knew that Jong Sok and In-ho's marriage was in trouble, especially since In-ho also seemed to ignore Jong Sok when Jong Sok was hospitalized. However, Jong Sok emphasized that divorce is not something easy, especially since she has 2 children and she also has to consider other things. Jong Sok then asked Roy why he wasn't married, but Roy revealed to Jong Sok that he was a US citizen because he was adopted from an orphanage when he was a child. Jong Sok thought that Roy was joking about his past because he seemed to be playing a prank on her, but Roy replied ambiguously. Roy then told Jong Sok to go home immediately because Jong Sok looked so tired. Upon arriving home, Asim reprimanded Jong Sok because she had neglected her duties as a housewife and made In-ho and Jong Min feel uncomfortable because Jong Sok worked at the same hospital as them. In addition, Irang also protests to her mother because Jong Sok is showing favoritism by ignoring her, even though Irang is now in the 3rd year of high school and really needs attention and support from her mother to prepare for college. Jong Sok and Irang then got into an argument until Irang chose to go to her room. Irang, who was upset with her mother, sent a text message to her friend Eun-so, who turned out to be Seung-hee's daughter. After the quarrel with Irang, Jong Sok was also involved in a quarrel with In-ho, who finally allowed Jong Sok to continue her residency at the hospital as long as Jong Sok was willing to keep their marriage a secret from their colleagues and never ask In-ho for any favors. In-ho also added that he would treat Jong Sok like any other resident doctor, so he told Jong Sok to prepare herself. Surprisingly, Jong Sok expected that from In-ho and thanked In-ho because he finally approved of her decision to become a resident doctor. The next day, Jong Sok is almost late for work, and In-ho deliberately closes the lift door to prevent Jong Sok from getting on. Fortunately, Roy arrived just in time to hold the lift door open for Jong Sok to board. Upon realizing that Jong Sok was arguing with her husband, Roy deliberately told Jong Sok to do outpatient care because he would check her health condition after the liver transplant surgery. And Jong Sok responded enthusiastically as if she deliberately wanted to make In-ho jealous of Roy. Even so, In-ho then retaliates against Jong Sok by asking her difficult questions during their briefing so that he can embarrass Jong Sok in front of Jong Min and the others. After the briefing, So-ra scolds Jong Min severely for not being able to answer In-ho's question. Upon hearing that, Jong Sok then quietly approaches Jong Min after So-ra leaves and tries to encourage him, who looks frantic after being scolded by So-ra. But unbeknownst to them, So-ra accidentally sees Jong Min and Jong Sok's closeness and thinks that Jong Sok is flirting with Jong Min. On the other hand, In-ho tells Seung-hee to make Jong Sok feel uncomfortable working as a resident doctor at their hospital because the job is very draining both physically and mentally. So In-ho believes that Jong Sok will eventually not be able to continue her work if they continue to corner her and make her work under pressure. Later that evening, the surgery department organizes a drinks event to welcome Roy and the resident doctors. In-ho is initially about to refuse and intends to prevent Jong Sok from going to the drinks, but Jong Sok and the others have already gathered in the lobby, and they prepare to leave. At the tavern, Roy reminds Jong Sok not to drink too much alcohol because she just underwent liver transplant surgery, but on the other hand, In-ho seems jealous of their closeness, especially when Jong Sok looks happy while chatting with Roy. Elsewhere, Asim tries to persuade Dok-rae to convince Jong Sok to stop working at the hospital, because Asim is worried that Jong Sok will ruin In-ho's career and future at the hospital if Jong Sok insists on continuing her residency. However, Dok-rae refused to persuade Jong Sok because she supported Jong Sok's decision to return to work as a doctor, especially since Jong Sok also felt happy with her decision. At the tavern, Jong Sok couldn't help but laugh when she overheard In-ho's conversation with his colleagues, who praised In-ho as an ideal husband. Upon hearing that, Jong Sok burst out laughing. Even Roy also tried to refrain from laughing because he knew the truth. Thinking that his mother was drunk, Jong Min then told Jong Sok to drink a lot of water to relieve the hangover. On the other hand, So-ra, who saw their closeness, then felt annoyed and told Jong Min to grill the meat. At the same time, the head of the surgical department, Dr. Yoon, asks Jong Sok about her husband. Surprisingly, Jong Sok tells everyone that her husband is dead, which makes In-ho so shocked that he accidentally spills the beer he's drinking towards Dr. Yoon. Roy, who heard this, could barely contain his laughter, while Jong Min accidentally touched the grill in front of him because he was too shocked to hear his mother's statement. After the drinking event, Jong Sok deliberately hitchhiked on Roy, who was driving a motorbike, because she felt annoyed at In-ho. Fortunately, Roy understood that and allowed Jong Sok to ride. On the way home, Jong Sok suddenly felt like throwing up from drinking too much, so they decided to pull over for a while and visit a park to relieve the hangover. Jong Sok then thanks Roy for putting up with her silliness tonight, and Roy chooses to keep the secret about her family even though Roy knows the truth. On the other hand, Jong Min and So-ra are secretly dating, and they often make out in the resident dormitory. Roy then asked Jong Sok why she kept her marriage with In-ho, and Jong Sok replied that In-ho wasn't really a bad person, especially since In-ho treated her very well during the early years of their marriage. However, after living together for a while, Jong Sok realized that the love between them started to fade, and the gratitude started to disappear. Jong Sok also added that the love between husband and wife would eventually fade away and no longer burn like the years of their marriage. Even so, Roy told Jong Sok that couples should still respect each other even if they no longer love each other. Since Jong Sok didn't make any comments, Roy realized that he had said something offensive to Jong Sok and immediately apologized. However, Jong Sok chose not to make an issue of it and invited Roy to go home immediately. The next morning, Irong found a letter written by Jong Sok, who tried to apologize and explain everything to Irong through the letter. At the hospital, Jong Sok deliberately makes breakfast for Jong Min and tells Jong Min to eat the dish immediately, but So-ra arrives and finishes the dish instead because it tastes so delicious. Meanwhile, A-sim hires a housemaid to do the housework, but she's so fussy and complains about things that the housemaid can't meet A-sim's standards and decides to resign. Jong Sok, who gets the news that the maid has decided to quit, panics and accidentally makes a mistake, which leads So-ra to scold her severely in front of the hospital staff, including Jong Min. Jong Min tries to persuade So-ra to be kind to Jong Sok, who is much older than them. But So-ra thinks that she's not making any mistake by scolding Jong Sok or the other resident doctors if they make mistakes, because she's responsible for guiding them. Shortly afterward, Jong Min tries to cheer up Jong Sok, who looks upset after being scolded by So-ra, and Jong Sok then tells Jong Min to massage her nape. Meanwhile, Dokrae accidentally meets A-sim at Mihi's beauty clinic when they're about to have a beauty treatment at the same time. Dokrae argues that Jong Min gave her a voucher to have a beauty treatment at the clinic as a birthday present for her, and she feels bad if she refuses the gift. Dokrae then asks Mihi to check the brown spots on her back, and Mihi suggests that Dokrae do a biopsy at a big hospital. Dokrae asks Mihi to keep her condition a secret from Jong Sok because she doesn't want to burden Jong Sok and make her worry. On his way home, Dokrae sees A-sim, who is picked up by an older gentleman, and they look intimate with each other. At the hospital, Jong Sok gives her homemade gimbap to Roy as an expression of gratitude for Roy taking her home last night. They then agreed to have lunch together at the canteen, and Jong Sok asked Roy to go to the canteen first, as she was going to check on a patient. At the canteen, Seung-hee almost slipped when someone accidentally bumped into her, but fortunately, Roy arrived in time to help her. Since working at the hospital, Roy soon became the talk of the doctors and staff because of his handsome face and well-built body like a model. Shortly afterward, Jong Sok arrived at the canteen and immediately approached Roy, who had been waiting for her to have lunch together. At the same time, Seung-hee and In-ho, who were also in the canteen, looked shocked as they had not expected that the handsome and charming Roy was so close to Jong Sok. Soon after that, Jong Min became overwhelmed as Jong Sok repeatedly called him for help, while he was also busy doing his job at the emergency department. In the evening, Jong Min reprimanded his mother because Jong Sok was burdening him, even though he was already quite overwhelmed with his work. They then got into an argument, and Jong Sok, who was angry at Jong Min, left. Jong Min, who felt guilty for going too far with his mother, sent a text message to apologize, as well as sending a video link from a YouTube channel that could make it easier for Jong Sok to do her job as a resident doctor. The next day, Jong Sok had to handle a terminally ill patient named Hae Nam, who was a life prisoner. Hae Nam was sentenced to life imprisonment after she deliberately poisoned her husband to kill him. Unexpectedly, Hae Nam refused to do treatment because she had resigned herself to her fate of being a prisoner for life, so Jong Sok tried to persuade her so that Hae Nam would be willing to be treated. On the other hand, Mr. Oh suddenly went berserk in his room after he was informed that he would be undergoing colostomy surgery, which has months to lifelong implications. Mr. Oh looked so frustrated, but Jong Sok could do nothing but keep Mr. Oh company as she listened to his complaints with great care. Soon after that, Jong-sok was assigned to handle a patient who had a problem with his lungs. After examining the patient's condition, Jong-sok realized that she had to put in a chest tube as the patient started having trouble breathing. However, Jong-sok had never placed a chest tube before, and her colleague told her to ask for help from a more senior resident doctor or a more professional surgeon than them, as it was very risky. As the patient's condition worsens, Jong-sok is finally forced to ask for help from In-ho, who reluctantly helps Jong-sok. At the same time, So-ra arrives and she seems surprised to find out that In-ho is willing to bother handling patients in the emergency department, even though the patient is the responsibility of the resident doctors. On the other hand, the nurses seem to be talking about Jong-sok and In-ho, who seem to be close, as if they are having a secret romance. They also get more suspicious when In-ho comes straight to the emergency department after getting a call from Jong-sok. Later that night, Hae-nam tells Jong-sok that she doesn't need to care about her because Hae-nam has lost her hope of living and wants to end her life immediately with the severe illness she has. Hae-nam tells Jong-sok to help people who deserve to be saved because their lives are much more valuable than her, who is a murderer. Not only Hae-nam, Mr. Oh also tells Jong-sok that he intends to go to the United States for treatment at one of the biggest hospitals in the country because he's not willing to get treatment at their hospital. Jong-sok tried to persuade Mr. Oh that going to the United States would not guarantee that Mr. Oh would undergo a different surgery because their hospital was also of international standard, so it was likely that Mr. Oh would also get similar treatment in the United States. Even so, Mr. Oh insisted on going to the US for treatment and told Jong-sok to leave his room. Jong-sok then told Roy that her patients refused to take the treatment for various reasons and she was desperate because she could not persuade them. Upon hearing that, Roy then encouraged Jong-sok by saying that persuading is an act that deals with the heart, and Roy considered that Jong-sok was far more skilled in matters dealing with the heart than other doctors. The next day, Roy visited the orphanage where he grew up to find clues about his biological parents. An orphanage caretaker then advised Roy to register his DNA with the police station and inform them of his purpose, as the police would usually help children from orphanages to find their biological families. Meanwhile, Irong invited Eun-so to have lunch at her house as Jong-sok had cooked a delicious meal for them. Jong-sok seems surprised when Eun-so tells her that her mother is also a doctor working in the family medicine department, and then asks about Eun-so's mother. However, Irong tells her mother not to interrogate Eun-so, who seems reluctant to answer any questions about her mother. Irong then asks about her father, and Jong-sok replies that In-ho is off to indoor golfing. Upon hearing that, Eun-so comments that indoor golfing is a place that people often use to make out with their mistresses. Eun-so said that because she found out that her mother was alone with In-ho at indoor golfing. Soon after that, Jong-sok thought about Eun-so's words, but she tried not to be suspicious of her husband, and distracted her mind about In-ho's affair by doing household chores. However, when Jong-sok is cleaning up In-ho's clothes, she accidentally finds a receipt for a diamond bracelet worth more than 5 million won. Jong-sok then asks Ae-sim, but her mother-in-law denies that she bought the diamond bracelet. Later that night, Jong-sok confronts In-ho about it, but In-ho lies to her by saying that he bought the diamond bracelet for Jong-sok's birthday gift and he intended to surprise her, even though In-ho actually gifted the diamond bracelet to Seung-hee. Shortly afterward, Jong-sok asked In-ho about Seung-hee, but In-ho pretended not to know anything about Seung-hee and admitted that they rarely met despite working at the same hospital. The next day, Jong-sok goes to Seung-hee in her office to apologize to Seung-hee for making Seung-hee hurt and suffer for so many years. Jong-sok initially wanted to apologize to Seung-hee immediately, but she felt so guilty towards Seung-hee that she didn't have the courage to confront Seung-hee for taking In-ho away from Seung-hee. Seung-hee seemed surprised that Jong-sok suddenly apologized to her, but Seung-hee then told Jong-sok that she had forgiven Jong-sok and was no longer concerned about it. Soon after that, Jong-sok gets information that Mr. Oh, who just got out of the hospital, suddenly collapsed in the car and is currently in critical condition and being handled by So-ra in the emergency department. So-ra attempted to perform CPR repeatedly to save Mr. Oh's life, but it didn't yield any results. When So-ra decides to give up, Jong-sok, who cares deeply for Mr. Oh, is determined to save Mr. Oh's life and starts performing CPR. At the same time, Jong-sok sees In-ho and Seung-hee's closeness outside the room, and her attention becomes distracted, so she accidentally touches the high-voltage defibrillator and causes her to collapse unconscious. In-ho, who saw the incident, immediately rushed Jong-sok to the treatment room so that she could receive immediate help. On the other hand, Seung-hee, who felt jealous because In-ho was so attentive to his wife, then took off the diamond bracelet from In-ho and put it in a drawer. On her way back to work, Jong-sok accidentally bumped into Seung-hee and she tried to confirm that Seung-hee had the diamond bracelet bought by In-ho. However, since Seung-hee had already put the bracelet in the drawer, Jong-sok thought that she was just hallucinating when she saw Seung-hee wearing the diamond bracelet. At the same time, Seung-hee gets a phone call from Eun-so and Jong-sok finally learns that Seung-hee has a daughter. Meanwhile, Roy reprimands the hospital staff for laughing at Jong-sok for the incident in the emergency department that made her faint. Roy intends to send a message to Jong-sok to ask about her condition, but he hesitates because he doesn't want to disturb Jong-sok, who is working to treat patients. On the other hand, Jong-sok visits Mr. Oh, who has regained consciousness after experiencing sudden cardiac arrest a few hours ago. Mr. Oh tells Jong-sok that he will undergo surgery at the hospital. Mr. Oh then asked about Jong-sok's condition because he apparently found out that Jong-sok fainted while trying to save his life. Mr. Oh apparently experienced a supernatural event when he was on the verge of death, so he could know everything that happened, including when his secretary referred to him as the old geezer and his children who never cared about him and only thought about his money. Therefore, Mr. Oh decided to undergo surgery at the hospital and asked Jong-sok to arrange the date. Shortly afterward, Jong-sok visits Hae-nam, who tells her that she cried tears of joy when she found out about her chronic illness because she never had the courage to take her own life, even though she had taken the life of other. Later that night, Irong tries to explain to her mother about her preparations for university, but Jong-sok falls asleep, so Irong gets upset and tells Jong-sok to get out of her room. Shortly afterward, In-ho gave Jong-sok the diamond bracelet he had promised so that Jong-sok would no longer suspect his affair with Seung-hee. On that occasion, In-ho also discusses Irong and asks Jong-sok to take a one-year residency leave so that she can focus more on helping Irong prepare because Irong will soon graduate from high school. Jong-sok also thought about a leave of absence, but she still had to consider many things before making the decision. The next day, Jong-sok was excited because she finally got her first salary and she decided to send some money to her mother and then buy gifts for her family. Jong-sok also gave a gift to Mr. Oh, whose condition was starting to improve after undergoing surgery. Mr. Oh seems to be touched that Jong-sok is so concerned about him, even though his family doesn't care about him at all, they never even come to visit him. On her way home, Seung-hee accidentally bumped into Jong-sok in the lift, and she noticed that Jong-sok was wearing the same diamond bracelet that In-ho had given her. An upset Seung-hee confronts In-ho when they meet at a restaurant for dinner, but In-ho tries to calm Seung-hee down and tells her that Jong-sok almost found out about their affair when she accidentally found the receipt for the diamond bracelet. On the way home, Seung-hee decides to pick Eun-so up, but Eun-so seems upset because she was with Irong. Upon arriving home, an angry Eun-so confronts her mother about the fact that she's the mistress daughter who can't call In-ho as her father, even though she's In-ho's biological father, just like Irong. Seung-hee tries to explain to Eun-so, but Eun-so corners her mother because Seung-hee was too naive to trust In-ho, even though In-ho never told her that he would divorce Jong-sok. The next day, Seung-hee started trying to overwhelm Jong-sok by giving her some work to do that day, and she was also seen wearing the diamond bracelet again. A few days later, Jong-sok experienced a nosebleed, so Roy immediately checked her condition, especially after Jong-sok revealed that she had forgotten to take immunosuppressant drugs for a few days. Roy then warned Jong-sok to never forget or miss taking immunosuppressant drugs, because if left unchecked, her liver would be damaged again. Soon after that, So-ra blatantly asked Jong-sok about her relationship with In-ho because rumors that they were dating had spread in the hospital. Jong-sok seems surprised by the question, but she immediately denies that she's involved in a romantic relationship with In-ho. When Hae-nam is about to undergo a series of examinations to confirm her condition, the policewoman asks Jong-sok to keep an eye on Hae-nam since she's not feeling well and can't stand up. Jong-sok agrees, but she asks the policewoman to uncuff Hae-nam because her wrists are injured from being handcuffed for too long. At the same time, Seung-hee told Jong-sok to get her research journal right away, even though Jong-sok was about to take Hae-nam to the radiology room. Jong-sok tries to convince Seung-hee that she should prioritize patients, but Hae-nam then takes advantage of the opportunity when Jong-sok is off guard and runs away from the hospital. Jong-sok immediately panics when she learns that Hae-nam has escaped, and she immediately informs the other doctors. Hae-nam apparently intended to visit her old house because she wanted to see it one last time. Fortunately, Hae-nam was found by a taxi driver who then drove her to the police station because he thought that Hae-nam was a dementia patient. Even though Hae-nam was found and she wasn't hurt at all, Jong-sok was severely scolded by her superiors for her negligence in taking care of Hae-nam, especially since she also asked the policewoman to uncuff Hae-nam. Dr. Lin then advised Jong-sok to resign immediately as she had caused quite a lot of trouble since she worked as a resident doctor at the hospital. On her way home, Jong-sok confides in Roy about the trouble she had at the hospital earlier today, and Jong-sok considers resigning from her job as a resident doctor. Roy advises Jong-sok that she should really consider everything before making a decision, saying that he will support whatever Jong-sok decides as long as it makes her happy. The next day, Jong-sok meets Mr. Oh, who has fully recovered and is preparing to go home. Mr. Oh welcomed Jong-sok happily, but Jong-sok looked sad, so Mr. Oh told her to tell him everything. Jong-sok tells Mr. Oh that she intends to quit her job because she's too old and stupid at the same time, so she often makes mistakes. However, Mr. Oh then encourages Jong-sok, which makes Jong-sok feel touched because Mr. Oh reminds her of her deceased father, especially since the way Mr. Oh encourages her is exactly the same way her father encouraged her when he was alive. Soon after that, Jong-sok goes to In-ho to tell him that she intends to resign from her job at the hospital. In-ho seemed both relieved and happy when he heard that, so he then informed Seung-hee about Jong-sok's intention to resign. After solidifying her intention to quit her job, Jong-sok then went to Dr. Lim to convey her intention. But unexpectedly, Dr. Lim took her to the conference room because the hospital director called her. In the conference room, the hospital director is holding a 10 billion won donation event, and Mr. Oh, the donor, makes a speech on the podium while thanking In-ho and Roy for operating on him. Surprisingly, Mr. Oh mentions that Jong-sok was the one who did the most for him during his treatment at the hospital. Mr. Oh revealed that Jong-sok was so attentive to him and sincerely comforted him when he was down due to his health condition. In addition, Jong-sok has also shown care and affection to him unconditionally. Even her affection for him exceeds the care and affection from his family. Therefore, Mr. Oh confirmed that he would withdraw his 10 billion won donation if Jong-sok resigned from the hospital, and he would conduct regular reviews to ensure that Jong-sok was still working at the hospital. Mr. Oh also added that he would always support Jong-sok to become a specialist doctor, even a professor, and fund Jong-sok's research if she intends to write a research journal someday. Since Mr. Oh had been so kind and considerate to her, even he would always support her to continue her career in medicine, Jong-sok decided to continue her work as a resident doctor at the hospital. In-ho looks so upset because Jong-sok undoes her intention to quit her job, while Seung-hee continues to urge him to persuade Jong-sok that she resigns from her job because Seung-hee feels sick of having to work in the same hospital as Jong-sok. On the other hand, Hae-nam's health condition was getting worse, but she still refused to be treated, even though Jong-sok had tried to persuade her repeatedly. When seeing Jong-sok, who is so attentive to her, Hae-nam remembers her daughter and tells Jong-sok a little about her past. Shortly afterward, Jong-sok asked Mi-hee for help in finding Hae-nam's daughter, Yong-long, who was said to be working as a doctor. Mi-hee initially refused to help Jong-sok, but after she met Roy, Mi-hee told Jong-sok to meet her with Roy as naturally and as soon as possible if Jong-sok wanted to get information about Yong-long. A few days later, Jong-sok went to the clinic where Yong-long worked as a doctor and told her about Hae-nam's deteriorating health condition because she refused to be treated. Jong-sok thought that Yong-long hated her mother because Yong-long didn't seem to want to deal with Hae-nam anymore. But surprisingly, Yong-long revealed to Jong-sok that she was the one who had poisoned her father's food because she wanted to be free from her abusive father who always tortured her and her mother. Yong-long felt very guilty to her mother because Hae-nam had to bear her guilt for the rest of her life, but Yong-long never had the courage to apologize to Hae-nam. After a medical checkup at the hospital, Dok-rae was relieved that Seung-hee had confirmed that the mole on her back was not cancerous. On the other hand, A-sim is diagnosed with thyroid cancer, but Jong-sok and In-ho ensure that A-sim will make a full recovery and be able to resume her usual activities after undergoing surgery. The next day, Jong-sok undergoes a disciplinary committee hearing for her negligence that caused Hae-nam to escape from the hospital. After some consideration, the hospital director decides on a 3-month salary cut as a punishment for Jong-sok, because if they fire Jong-sok, then Mr. Oh will withdraw the 10 billion won donation. Shortly afterward, Yong-long comes to the hospital because she intends to see her mother. Jong-sok seems very relieved and happy that Yong-long is finally willing to come to see her mother, and she then takes Yong-long to see Hae-nam. Yong-long couldn't hold back her tears as she reunited with her mother after a long time. On the other hand, Hae-nam also looked so moved because she was finally able to meet her beloved daughter again. Sometime later, Jong-sok handles a patient named Ji-seon who has cancer, but she refuses to undergo surgery because she wants to wait for her fetus in the womb to reach 2 kilograms. Despite opposition from her father, Ji-seon insisted on giving birth to the baby and refused to reveal the identity of the baby's father to anyone, including her parents. Ji-seon's father, Mr. Yu, then went to Jong-sok and expressed his intention to hand over the baby to an orphanage because he did not want the 20-year-old Ji-seon to become a mother. However, Jong-sok said that she couldn't do that and suggested Mr. Yu to persuade Ji-seon. Shortly afterward, Seung-hee confronts Jong-sok about her advice to Ji-seon because Seung-hee thinks that Jong-sok doesn't understand the situation of Ji-seon, who intends to raise her child out of wedlock. At the same time, Jong-sok realizes that Seung-hee is wearing the same diamond bracelet that she is wearing, but she tries not to be suspicious of her, even though Seung-hee deliberately shows off the bracelet to provoke Jong-sok. While having dinner with In-ho at a fancy restaurant, Seung-hee apologizes to In-ho for pressuring him too much to get rid of Jong-sok from the hospital. After they make up, Seung-hee takes In-ho to the hotel to have some fun, but In-ho reveals that he's just been taking finasteride to treat baldness, which is causing him to become unexcited doing coition. A few hours later, they decided to go home, but at the same time, So-ra, who was at the hotel to celebrate her grandmother's birthday, accidentally saw Seung-hee and In-ho, who looked so intimate with each other. Not only So-ra, Roy, who just arrived at the hotel lobby, also saw Seung-hee and In-ho, who looked intimate when they were about to enter the car. A few days ago, Roy had also seen Seung-hee and In-ho in the same car, but he tried not to be suspicious because both were colleagues at the hospital. However, after seeing the intimacy shown by them at the hotel, Roy became convinced that In-ho had cheated on Seung-hee. The following day, Roy confronted In-ho about his affair and told In-ho to stop lying to his wife because Roy cared about Jong-sok. On the other hand, Jong-sok accidentally met Ki-yeon at the coffee shop and realized that Ki-yeon was wearing the same diamond bracelet that she was wearing. Since Ki-yeon tells Jong-sok that the diamond bracelet is quite popular and many people are wearing it, Jong-sok feels a little relieved and no longer suspects Seung-hee as her husband's mistress. Meanwhile, In-ho, who was upset because Roy confronted him about his affair, then deliberately humiliated Jong-sok in front of the other doctors, and even continued to corner her at the hospital so that Jong-sok would feel uncomfortable and quit her job immediately. However, Jong-sok insists that she will continue her work at the hospital because she wants to start a new life for her future. The next day, Roy invites Jong-sok to run a marathon together on her day off, and Jong-sok then takes advantage of it to return the favor to Mi-hee. On their day off, Jong-sok and Mi-hee run a marathon with Roy and his group, but Mi-hee realizes that Roy seems to like Jong-sok. At the hospital, In-ho suddenly felt pain in his shoulder while performing surgery, and when he checked his condition, the doctor told In-ho that he suffered from frozen shoulder. The doctor said that In-ho had to undergo physiotherapy treatment and stretch regularly if he wanted to fully recover from the disease and carry out his activities as a surgeon as before. Some time later, Jong-sok observed the examination results of a leukemia patient named Mr. Choi and informed In-ho that there was an abscess in his rectal diverticulum, instead of cancerous cells as In-ho thought. However, In-ho underestimated the judgment of Jong-sok, who was a first-year resident doctor, so Jong-sok then risked her job as long as In-ho was willing to do a biopsy to prove her judgment. In-ho, who felt confident in his own judgment and was excited that he could finally make Jong-sok quit her job, then performed the biopsy, but unexpectedly, the examination results proved that Jong-sok's judgment was correct. Therefore, In-ho finally allows Jong-sok to return to handling Mr. Choi, who was her patient. Later that night, while he was undergoing acupuncture treatment to relieve the pain in his shoulder, In-ho received a phone call from Lee-rong's homeroom teacher about Lee-rong's preparation to enter the art faculty at a university. Upon arriving home, In-ho immediately enters Lee-rong's room and he is visibly upset when he discovers art-related items that Lee-rong had deliberately hidden. In-ho has always emphasized to his children that they should go to medical school because being a doctor is the pride of their family. Lee-rong, who has just arrived home, is shocked to see her art items scattered in the living room and her father waiting for her and acting as if he wants to punish her. At the hospital, Jong-sok tries to stop a patient named Lee who insists on going home because the X-ray shows that he is fine after falling down due to being too drunk. However, Jong-sok anticipates the possibility of Lee's internal bleeding, so she tells Lee to stay in the hospital for a while until they make sure Lee is fully recovered. A few minutes after Jong-sok left to check on another patient, Lee suddenly fainted, and So-ra immediately checked on Lee's condition. Some time later, when Jong-sok was about to go home, So-ra told Jong-sok that Lee had just undergone emergency surgery because he had internal bleeding, just as Jong-sok had predicted. So-ra then asked how Jong-sok knew that Lee had internal bleeding, and Jong-sok explained that she had touched Lee's abdomen and noticed that Lee had abnormal abdominal contractions. Upon hearing that, So-ra praises Jong-sok for realizing something that other doctors might consider trivial, but it could save someone's life because Jong-sok never underestimates people. Shortly afterward, Jong-sok accidentally meets Eun-so in the hospital lobby, and Jong-sok finally learns that Eun-so is Seung-hee's daughter. After learning that fact, Jong-sok thought back about Eun-ho's affair with Seung-hee, so she decided to run away from her house, hoping to get her prejudice about her husband out of her mind. But unexpectedly, Jong-sok meets Roy, who intends to reveal to Jong-sok about Eun-ho's affair with Seung-hee. At the same time, A-sim suddenly appeared and told Jong-sok to go home immediately, so Roy abandoned his intention to reveal the affair. Upon arriving home, Jong-sok was shocked to see Lee-rong sitting on her knees and Lee-rong's art scattered in the living room. Eun-ho is furious when he learns that Lee-rong didn't intend to go to medical school in the first place, especially since Jong-sok also supports it. Jong-sok tries to convince Eun-ho to understand Lee-rong and support Lee-rong to determine her own path in life, but Eun-ho doesn't care at all about Lee-rong's wishes and dreams, and he doesn't even hesitate to throw away Lee-rong's art items. Jong-sok, who doesn't want Lee-rong to despair because her father doesn't support her decision to study art, rushes to pick up Lee-rong's art items from the trash and clean them up. Soon after that, Jong-sok went to Eun-ho to convince Eun-ho to let Lee-rong study at the art faculty according to her wishes. But surprisingly, Eun-ho says that he'll let Lee-rong go to art school if Jong-sok stops working at the hospital. Upon hearing that, Jong-sok then becomes angry and insists to her husband that she will keep working at the hospital so that she can pay for all of Lee-rong's training and education to study at the art faculty. Jong-sok then confronts Eun-ho about Lee-rong being close friends with Seung-hee's daughter, which makes her feel uncomfortable. Eun-ho, who knew about it, rushed to Seung-hee to confirm about Eun-so and Lee-rong's friendship. And Seung-hee explained to Eun-ho that their daughters became close because they took lessons at the same place, and their relationship would be strained if they went to different universities. The next day, Jong-sok asks Seung-hee about the diamond bracelet, and Seung-hee tells her that it was a gift from her husband, then leaves. In her office, Seung-hee recalls her confrontation with Eun-so, which led to Seung-hee revealing to Eun-so that she was Eun-ho's first love and his lover when they were in college. But Jong-sok suddenly appeared and ruined their romance by snatching Eun-ho from her. Meanwhile, Dok-rae visits A-sim, who has just undergone surgery for thyroid cancer, as he brings her food and drinks. A-sim then thanks Dok-rae for being so considerate even though she was bad to Dok-rae's daughter because she was against Eun-ho donating his liver to Jong-sok. Later that night, Roy is kind enough to replace Jong-sok for the night duty at the hospital because Jong-sok has to attend Lee-rong's admission counseling with her homeroom teacher. At the same time, A-sim, who saw Jong-sok and Roy's closeness, then warned Eun-ho that Roy might have romantic feelings for Jong-sok. Eun-ho initially denies it because a handsome young doctor like Roy can't possibly like a mother of two who is older than him, especially since Jong-sok also has a husband. However, A-sim believes that Roy must like Jong-sok because she once met Roy and Jong-sok, who met near their house. Upon hearing that, Eun-ho then confronted Roy, who blatantly met his wife near their house, but Roy cornered Eun-ho by saying that Eun-ho actually didn't care about Jong-sok and he was just worried that his affair would be exposed. The following day, Roy advises Ji-seon to give up her pregnancy so that she can immediately undergo intensive treatment to cure her illness, because if she delays the treatment for too long, it could threaten Ji-seon's life. However, Ji-seon insisted on keeping her pregnancy because she wanted to give birth to her baby. Even Ji-seon also fought with her mother, Mrs. Yu, who tried to persuade her to give up her pregnancy. While Ji-seon is going to the toilet, Mrs. Yu secretly takes Ji-seon's mobile phone and she finally finds out that Ji-seon is dating Min-jun, who is an actor. Mrs. Yu tries to confirm it with Ji-seon, but Ji-seon denies that Min-jun is the man who impregnated her. On the other hand, Jong-sok intends to borrow money from the bank to pay for Lee-rong's training and education in preparation for applying to art school, which is worth 30 million won. But unexpectedly, Jong-sok can only apply for a credit loan because she has applied for a loan worth 400 billion won with a real estate as collateral. Jong-sok was shocked to hear that because she didn't own any property, let alone a high-value real estate. After investigating, A-sim apparently used Jong-sok's name and signature stamp to apply for a loan at the bank. The next day, So-ra tells Jong-min to get her mobile phone that was left in her dorm room. Upon knowing that, Jong-sok offered to get her mobile phone, and upon arriving at So-ra's room, Jong-sok instead cleaned up her room because it was too messy. When Jong-sok was about to get So-ra's mobile phone, he found Jong-min's watch, and Jong-sok looked so shocked when he found out that Jong-min was dating So-ra. During lunch, So-ra asks Jong-min about his mother, but Jong-min is always evasive to explain anything about his mother while lying to So-ra that his father and Jong-sok are not having a secret affair. However, So-ra asks not because of the rumors about Eun-ho and Jong-sok, but because she saw Eun-ho having an affair with Seung-hee at the hotel, which made So-ra feel sorry for Jong-min's mother because she had been betrayed by her husband. Even though she already knew that Jong-min was dating So-ra, Jong-sok was reluctant to confirm it with them because Jong-min told her that he wasn't in a romantic relationship with anyone. while So-ra refused to explain anything about her private life to Jong-suk. While having dinner, In-ho tells Seung-yi that Roy has somehow found out about their affair. Upon hearing that, Seung-yi confronts Roy at the hospital and tells him that she will continue her relationship with In-ho. Seung-yi also wasn't afraid if Roy revealed to Jong-suk about her affair with In-ho, but Roy firmly warned Seung-yi not to use him because he wouldn't destroy someone else's family, which would only benefit Seung-yi. Roy felt disappointed in Seung-yi because he initially thought that In-ho was a jerk for having an affair with another woman, but Seung-yi turned out to be worse than In-ho because she was intent on destroying Jong-suk and her family. Some time later, several film crews were seen filming In-ho's activities at the hospital, such as visiting his patients and checking their health conditions, as well as performing surgeries. However, due to the sudden recurrence of In-ho's shoulder pain, Dr. Yoon assigned Roy to replace In-ho, and Roy soon became the center of attention due to his handsome face and model-like appearance. On the other hand, a young woman named So-yeon comes to So-ra and tells her that her husband, Seon-gyu, seems so depressed after undergoing surgery because his surgery failed. So-yeon was very worried about her husband because Seon-gyu seemed to have lost hope and intended to end his life. Meanwhile, Jong-suk, who was changing the bandage on Seon-gyu's stomach, tried to encourage Seon-gyu so that Seon-gyu would not lose hope that his illness could be cured and he could return to living his life normally. However, Seon-gyu was already too distraught and told Jong-suk his grievances. Seon-gyu also told Jong-suk that he had gone to the roof of the hospital this afternoon because he intended to end his life. The following day, Jong-suk suggested to So-ra that they work with the psychiatry department because Seon-gyu was severely depressed. However, So-ra thought that it was normal because Crohn's disease is commonly suffered by young patients. Patients are initially worried that they won't be able to return to a normal life after surgery, but most of them make a full recovery and continue their lives as usual. The next day, So-yeon's parents came to see Seon-gyu and told him to divorce So-yeon because they assumed that the sickly Seon-gyu would not be able to make their daughter happy. Upon learning that, Seon-gyu then told his wife to buy food for him, as he intended to go to the roof to end his life. Soon after that, Jong-suk, who was about to check on Seon-gyu's condition, was shocked to find a letter left by Seon-gyu for his wife because in the letter, Seon-gyu indicated that he intended to end his life. Jong-suk immediately called the police and firefighters to inform them about a patient trying to end his life while searching for Seon-gyu's whereabouts. Shortly afterward, Roy and In-ho were informed that a patient tried to end his life by jumping off the roof of the hospital, and they rushed to the roof when they found out that Jong-suk was also there to persuade the patient. When Jong-suk thought that she had successfully persuaded Seon-gyu, unexpectedly, Seon-gyu suddenly jumped off the roof, causing Jong-suk, who grabbed his arm, to fall. Fortunately, the firefighters had set up an air mattress below, so both of them managed to survive. Surprisingly, In-ho suddenly approached Jong-suk and he seemed so worried about Jong-suk while holding her hand tightly. However, the most surprising thing was Roy, who suddenly came and hugged Jong-suk in front of many people because he was so worried about Jong-suk. On the other hand, Jong-suk did not expect In-ho and Roy to show such an overreaction, especially since they were supposed to keep In-ho and Jong-suk's relationship a secret. After that incident, the rumors about Jong-suk became more widespread, especially now that she was rumored to be involved in a love triangle with In-ho and Roy. However, Jong-suk doesn't want to think about the rumors because right now she wants to focus on helping Seon-gyu regain hope in his life. Jong-suk then takes Seon-gyu to visit the cancer ward so that Seon-gyu can realize that in this world there are still many people who never stop fighting to survive, even though they have been diagnosed with a deadly disease. Later that evening, In-ho has dinner with Seung-hee and Eun-so to celebrate Eun-so's silver medal win in a competition. Eun-so then tells In-ho that she deliberately approached Lee-rong because she was upset with In-ho and his family. Surprisingly, Lee-rong suddenly appears behind them because Eun-so had invited Lee-rong to dinner to reveal to Lee-rong about In-ho's affair with her mother. Eun-so also tells Lee-rong that In-ho is her biological father. Upon hearing that, Lee-rong storms off, crying in frustration because she had no idea that her father had been having an affair with another woman and even had a daughter the same age as her. Upon arriving home, Lee-rong revealed to her grandmother about In-ho's affair with another woman that had produced a child the same age as her. Upon learning that, A-sim scolds In-ho for making the same mistake twice, and she wonders why In-ho is so stupid when he's a doctor. A-sim then asks about the woman who was In-ho's affair, and In-ho replies that the woman was Seung-hee, who was his lover in college. Since Lee-rong already knew about In-ho's affair, A-sim told In-ho to persuade Lee-rong to keep it a secret from Jong-suk. In-ho then went to Irong in her room and tried to persuade her by saying that he would support Irong to study at the art faculty. Although Irong knows that her father did it because he felt guilty about her, Irong has no intention of revealing In-ho's affair to Jong-sok because she's worried about Jong-sok's health. The following day, Jong-min is about to meet In-ho at his office to hand over a gift from In-ho's former patient. However, as Jong-min places the gift on the desk, he accidentally reads a text message from Seung-hee sent to In-ho's mobile phone. Jong-min initially doesn't want to suspect his father, but he gets even more curious, so he decides to come to their meeting place in secret. Upon arrival, Jong-min was shocked to see his father making out with Seung-hee. Jong-min then confronts In-ho about his affair with Seung-hee, but In-ho thinks that Jong-min found out about it from Irong and A-sim, which makes Jong-min even more shocked because he didn't expect them to know about the affair. Jong-min tells In-ho that he used to want to be a talented doctor like In-ho because he respected his father so much. However, after learning about In-ho's affair, Jong-min then expresses his disappointment to In-ho. At the tutoring center, Eun-so thinks that she has succeeded in destroying Irong's family, but Irong firmly says that she won't keep quiet because in this case, it's because her mother is the victim. Irong then insults Eun-so as the couple cheating daughter, and if Seung-hee and In-ho's affair is exposed, then Seung-hee and Eun-so who will suffer the most because Seung-hee is having an affair with a married man and has a child out of wedlock. In the evening, Jong-min approaches his mother who looks exhausted from working all day and having to watch the night shift. Jong-min actually wants to reveal to Jong-sok about In-ho's affair, but he's worried about Jong-sok's health condition, so he chooses to keep it a secret. The next day, Ji-seon's parents made a post on the National Civil Complaints website about Ji-seon being impregnated by an actor, and the public wondered if the actor was Min-jun. At the same time, Min-jun visits Ji-seon at the hospital to confirm Ji-seon's pregnancy, but Ji-seon denies that the baby is Min-jun's baby, although Min-jun insists to Ji-seon that he will take responsibility and marry Ji-seon. On holiday, while Jong-sok is away with Mi-hee, Jong-min and his family discuss In-ho's affair. Jong-min urges In-ho to end his affair with Seung-hee, but Irong reveals to her brother that In-ho and Seung-hee have a daughter who is the same age as her. Upon learning that, Jong-min then tells In-ho to decide whether In-ho will divorce Jong-sok and choose Seung-hee, or In-ho will end his affair with Seung-hee and maintain his marriage with Jong-sok. On the other hand, Mi-hee invited Jong-sok to visit a psychic who then warned Jong-sok because she had an unusual destiny in a romantic relationship, especially now that someone was trying to get close to her. A few days later, In-ho came to Roy and told him to keep his affair a secret while promising that he would make a choice whether he would divorce Jong-sok or end his affair with Seung-hee. Meanwhile, A-sim intends to celebrate Jong-sok's birthday at a luxury hotel and insists to In-ho that he doesn't divorce Jong-sok. While buying a birthday present for Jong-sok, A-sim remembers Jong-sok's mother and she intends to see if Dok-rae knows about In-ho's affair. A-sim then met Dok-rae and gave her a gift as an expression of gratitude because Dok-rae had been so attentive to A-sim while she was hospitalized. After a conversation with Dok-rae, A-sim can confirm that Dok-rae and her daughter don't know about In-ho's affair. Later that evening, Roy intends to reveal to Jong-sok about In-ho's affair with Seung-hee. However, after he saw Jong-sok who looked happy because she was going to celebrate her birthday with a dinner with her family at a hotel, Roy then abandoned his intention and only wished Jong-sok a happy birthday. As Jong-sok was preparing the prescription, a nurse informed her about Seung-hee's social media account and revealed that In-ho changed the surgery date for a holiday. Surprisingly, on the same date that In-ho told Jong-sok that he would be attending a conference in Paris, Seung-hee also went on holiday to Paris. After checking several posts on Seung-hee's social media accounts, Jong-sok finally found out that her husband had cheated on her with Seung-hee. Jong-sok looked so heartbroken and devastated when she found out the truth, but she tried to stay strong to face everything. Soon after that, Jong-sok went to Ki-yeon and confirmed to her that she rejected Ki-yeon's offer to move to the pediatrics department because she wanted to work in the same department as Seung-hee. Meanwhile, In-ho and his family, who are waiting for Jong-sok at the hotel, get into an argument because Irong keeps criticizing her father for having an affair, while Jong-min defends Irong because according to him, In-ho has no right to scold Irong. Upon seeing that, A-sim then tells In-ho that a man will lose his honor as the head of the family in front of his children when he is caught having an affair with another woman. At the same time, Seung-hee, who learns that In-ho and his family are at the hotel to celebrate Jong-suk's birthday, intends to reveal to them about In-ho's affair. Soon after that, Jong-suk finally arrived at the hotel and her family greeted her awkwardly while complimenting Jong-suk's beautiful and graceful appearance. They then celebrated Jong-suk's birthday with a birthday cake while singing to Jong-suk. On the other hand, Seung-hee, who saw it from behind the door, imagined herself in Jong-suk's shoes, as In-ho was supposed to marry her after they graduated from college. However, Seung-hee finally abandoned her intention to ruin Jong-suk's birthday celebration after she got a text message from Eun-so. After singing and taking pictures together, Irong gave a pair of shoes to her mother as a birthday present, while Jongmin and Asim presented Jong-suk with a perfume and a fancy wallet. However, In-ho doesn't give any gifts as he had bought Jong-suk a diamond bracelet a few months ago as a birthday present, and instead, In-ho gives Jong-suk a bouquet of flowers. When In-ho was about to cut the birthday cake, surprisingly, Jong-suk slammed In-ho's face onto the cake, causing In-ho's face to smudge. In-ho and the others thought Jong-suk would throw a tantrum, but unexpectedly, Jong-suk burst out laughing, telling In-ho that it could be considered In-ho's birthday present to her. On the way home, In-ho and his family tried to break the awkward ice as Jong-suk seemed to be in a tizzy as if she had found out about In-ho's affair. Irong then discusses about her parents' marriage, which at the time was arguably too hasty because In-ho had impregnated Jong-suk. Upon hearing that, Jong-suk was reminded of the past when Mi-hee sang discordantly at her wedding reception, but Asim made a mess of things, so Jong-suk suddenly burst into tears and asked In-ho to drop her by the side of the road. After thinking about things for a whole night, Jong-suk decides to consult a divorce lawyer about her intention to divorce from In-ho, who has been having an affair with another woman. Upon knowing that Jong-suk was frantic, Roy then suggested to her to participate as a medical volunteer in a free community medical service event organized by their hospital regularly. Soon after that, In-ho asked his children about what Jong-suk was going to discuss until she told them to gather in the living room. Jong-suk then met them and expressed her intention to move into the resident dormitory because she was too tired to commute every day since the distance between their house and the hospital was quite far, especially since she had to take public transport. Irong and Jongmin don't mind at all, but Asim doesn't seem to agree because she can't find a housemaid who meets her standards. So Jong-suk tells Asim to lower her standards so that the housemaid will feel at home while working at their house. In addition, Jong-suk also informs In-ho that she will volunteer as a medic in the free medical service program organized by their hospital, so that she will move into the residence dorm early. Arriving at the dormitory, Jong-suk accidentally meets So-ra, who is going to meet Jongmin. Jong-suk then tells So-ra that from now on she will be living in the resident dormitory and her room happens to be adjacent to So-ra's. The following day, Jong-suk and her colleagues were getting ready to go to the location of the free medical service that would be held in a village 2 hours' drive from their city. Upon knowing that Jong-suk will participate as a medical volunteer, In-ho decides to participate in the free medical service program. In-ho tries to pay attention to Jong-suk, hoping he can mend his relationship with Jong-suk. However, Jong-suk instead ignored him and chose to provide medical services by visiting villagers' homes. In her task of checking on the health of the elderly in their respective homes, Jong-suk is assisted by Do Gyeom, who seems impressed when he sees Jong-suk being so serious and wholehearted in providing medical services to the elderly who cannot afford treatment at the clinic. Jong-suk doesn't even hesitate to wash the feet of an old man who has acute diabetes and makes food for the old man. At the hospital, Dok-rae, who had just checked her shoulder at the orthopedic department, accidentally met Seung-hee as she was about to leave the hospital. They then take time to chat for a while, and during the conversation, Dok-rae tells Seung-hee that her daughter is a resident doctor, but she hides the fact from Seung-hee that Jong-suk works at the hospital. Soon after that, Asim comes to the hospital to meet Seung-hee and tells her to end her affair with In-ho while confirming to Seung-hee that until then, Jong-suk is her one and only daughter-in-law. Seung-hee, who was devastated to hear that, tried to melt In-ho's mother's heart by showing her Eun-so's picture. But Asim didn't seem to care at all about her other granddaughter and would assume that she never knew Eun-so, then left Seung-hee crying in frustration that her daughter was not acknowledged by Asim. Later that evening, while Jong-suk was preparing dinner for the medical volunteers and villagers, she accidentally splashed hot oil and scalded her finger. Upon seeing that, Roy immediately helped Jong-suk to heal her wound, but at the same time, In-ho appeared and seemed jealous because Roy was holding his wife's hand. After changing his clothes, In-ho then went to catch up with his colleagues who were about to have dinner at the village hall. Not noticing a phone call from Eun-so, who was trying to contact In-ho because her mother suddenly had severe stomach cramps, so she had to be taken to the hospital immediately. Seung-hee asks the paramedics to take her to the other hospital because she doesn't want to be treated at the hospital where she works, so as not to become the subject of gossip from the hospital staff. Meanwhile, and Ho, who was jealous of Jong Sok and Roy's closeness, tried to dissuade them. But he got involved in a series of embarrassing incidents, so he became upset and vented his anger by drinking too much until he got drunk. Even Roy, who usually restricts himself from drinking too much alcohol, chose to go over his limit that night because their department head scolded them if they didn't drink the alcohol that had been served by the villagers. A drunken Ho then invites Roy to sing karaoke together in front of their colleagues and the villagers, while So-ra and Jong-min secretly go to a quiet place to make out. When So-ra borrows Jong-min's mobile phone, she accidentally finds a video recorded by Jong-min during Jong Sok's birthday celebration at the hotel some time ago. So-ra seems surprised to learn that Jong Sok is Jong-min's mother. At the same time, a drunken Ho accidentally reveals that Jong Sok is his wife by calling Jong Seok affectionately in front of everyone.
여보? 여보! 무슨 여보?